Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. Don, you've been tweeting a lot. I never know whether that's good or bad for the market or what implications it may have for the future, but certainly the platform has become more usable, it seems, given that you're, well, using it. And that can only mean that altcoins went down because I feel like there's some sort of inverse correlation between altcoin price and the usability of Twitter for you. And so now that you've been active, do you want to sort of talk us through your experience and thought process on that?
I mean, it was basically all the meme guys. Like when I posted that I thought memes were like overvalued and are gonna go down, and the hype was kind of like peaking. People got really upset at me, and it got that bad that I just didn't want to tweet anymore. Because I mean, if you tweet then like 20 comments are shit and one is good, I mean, what's the point, right? So I used it less, and now that kind of my thesis, my meme thesis has played out, and I mean, the general altcoin market has tanked. But I would say like I've had a lot of people be like, hey, you got lucky because the entire altcoin market tanked. And that's why the memes are down. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because basically meme coins were the one thing everyone was trading, right? Like no one actually traded anything else. So like getting that market right is getting everything right. So it's always gonna be. But yeah, that was kind of like the whole experience basically. Like I got so much shit that I didn't really feel like being on Twitter anymore. Now I'm getting not as much shit. And I'm sure the moment this market bounces, which I mean today, like the sentiment has flipped quite bearish generally, I think. So the moment you get like a little bit of an update, you're gonna see the hate return. I can already feel it. But yeah, so far so good.
So far, so usable. Do you think that well, I guess your read on sentiment and your use of sentiment has been vindicated this time around? Because do you remember the discussion we had on Casual Friday, where I essentially probed, like, to what extent is Twitter sentiment and your replies useful for setups? And the answer was it turned out to be very useful because some levels you would close at, and then if sentiment was bad enough, you'd like keep the short, etc. So it was important enough to affect sort of trade parameters and trade
Yeah.
ideas to their very core. I guess that's played out / has been vindicated. What's your experience? What does that kind of process look like, where you're trade managing and sentiment is a big part of it, but you hate fucking using Twitter? Like, is it like a dynamic thing? Is it just in your head you get that initial burst and think, okay, these guys are fucking dumb, and I can stop paying attention? Do you go back and like check and set some bait periodically? Like, how how advanced is this sentiment farming system?
I mean, I do set some bait from time to time. Yes. No, basically, like when it gets this bad, and I've had this before, right? It's not like this is the first time that this has happened. It's basically, I still remember in 2017, 18, like my comments were generally really nice, but I still got quite a bit of shit, which I wasn't used to back then. And like pretty much every single time where I was like, hey, I think this market is overheating, this has been the response, right? It's not the first time. It's just the worst, right? It's never been this bad. And then I just like, if Twitter becomes unusable, I'm just like, okay, I'm pretty certain that the position or like the market thoughts that I have are correct. There's a lot of people on the other side of it that are terrified. Otherwise you wouldn't, like, terrified or just in general like very, very stupid, because otherwise you wouldn't really engage, right? Like there's a bunch of people that disagree with me that are really smart, but they don't engage, right? Like why would you go into someone's comments and be like, you suck, fuck off? Like only people that really like suck at trading do that. And when you know that a bunch of people that are really bad at what they do are on the opposite side and are very vocal, it becomes easier to hold positions basically. Because what you have to realize when you bearish these things, after they've gone up like 200, 300, 400, 10,000%, right? Is that it's not easy to hold these, because I mean, you've seen what they can do. Everyone is telling you that you're wrong. So having that helps, right? And even like skilled trader friends or whatever would not necessarily agree all the time. So like just having that added confluence of just people that are not so smart in comments just helps. I would not base my entire trade around it. I had solid setups on pretty much everything. and solid logic too. It wasn't just like, hey, these idiots need to be put down. That's not how it works. It's more like I have a solid read on this. The whole meme thing peaked with the ETH ETF, right? Like when that became like a little bit louder, that was like the tail end of the memes, basically. And that makes sense, right? Because the memes were all on Solana, and the moment you shift focus away from Solana to something else, they're gonna suffer, and then through that, Solana's gonna suffer. And here we are now, like a couple of months later, and that all played out. Now Twitter is usable again. That's why I closed shorts. Just took a little bit of profit in like the last few days on a lot of the stuff that I've been shorting down. Not necessarily because I think they're bottomed. I think a lot of these like can go much lower, but just because I think I've done enough, and I want to focus on just kind of like getting the market generally right, not being stuck in like meme shorts and other shits that doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's only so much sort of trading bandwidth that I think if you're a discretionary click trader that you have, you know?
Yeah.
If we were chatting like completely off the record, which is what we kind of do on this show anyway, but if we were like completely off the record, right? And I'd be like, "Hey man, these memes fucking nuke. Do you feel vindicated? Is there like a slight ego trip type of thing? Is there a fuck you, I told you so, or is it more like, oh, thank God, because I was like nervous about this? What's the I guess casual, you know, what are the casual feelings that you're experiencing? Because I feel like I would have been far worse than you. Like if I were as vocal as you were and had to put up with the amount of shit that you did, I'm pretty sure I would, you know, bite the forbidden fruit, so to speak, and just go off the deep end on some megamaniacal, narcissistic, self-aggrandizing rant. But you seemed pretty tepid throughout this whole thing. So no main character intentions, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, like people are losing money, right? And so it's a little bit in poor taste, I think, to go too hard, even though they've kind of like just went off the rails towards me. But I mean, people are losing money, so I'm just like, okay, I will say something because, like I said, this time was quite extreme, but I don't need to constantly dance on their graves.
But I think that proves why the asymmetry of being, you know, that makes obvious the asymmetry of being bearish on like social media trading stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you're wrong, you know, you'll just get fucked forever, basically. But if you're right, you can't even properly celebrate because no one's in a celebratory mood, you know? Like, everyone's kind of in the shit. Whereas it seems completely reversed on the bullish side. Like, if you're right, you're an absolute hero oracle. If you're wrong, well, everyone's kind of jointly suffering and you're on the same side as them. So there's sort of camaraderie in the pain type of thing. So just bull post is the Twitter lesson there. I'm sure that's in the Twitter engagement course that you said you were building last week. So you can add a chapter on that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it is how it is. Like, that's how it is. It doesn't really pay. Not even in the it just generally isn't worth it. Because I think if you're wrong, you put people that like something. Like if people listen to you and you're wrong, I mean, they like something and then they're not going to be in position and they're just going to like completely go insane. And like you said, if you're right, it doesn't really have anyone celebrating, and you cannot either. That's why usually I think the best thing to do is just do it quietly. But I feel like that's a little bit of a shitty thing to do, like to me at least. Like when I have strong feelings that people are gonna get wrecked, I try to at least be a little bit vocal about it. But yeah, it is not like it. That's not a trade that is worth taking for anyone out there.
Yeah, thankless job.
Yeah, it doesn't really pay.
Also, I don't know if you agree, but in my mind, there's always part of what makes that difference between being bearish wrong versus bullish wrong is that it's much easier to be wrong on a long and try again than it is to be wrong on a short and rebuy at a higher price. Even though it shouldn't be, just like purely psychologically, I think that there's like a blocker that comes up with most people, whereas like, oh, I bought too early, whatever, this is where I buy in, and it's like an automatic process. You don't really think much about it. It's like, well, you know, roll the dice another time. Whereas if you were bearish, and especially if you had like a good position on or whatever else, and you get blown out and you have to buy those same bags back at a higher price. I feel like that feels, and again, this is all like emotional shit, but it feels kind of more humbling and both humbling and humiliating at the same time. So I feel like in terms of like regaining exposure, if someone led you to the massacre on the long side, you can come back from that because buying at a lower price is more straightforward. Whereas if someone if you followed someone's idea on the short side, dumped your bags, and then you get blown out and have to buy them back higher, I just feel like that's not as easy slash intuitive, and there's a lot more reluctance around that. Maybe people in the comments can let us know if that's their experience. I know that's my experience for sure, and even some ego comes into it. Like, I sold this thing, and do I really want to buy it back at a higher price? My exit is supposed to mean something, like all this shit that doesn't belong in trading but always kind of creeps up, especially if you're dealing with your cyclical portfolio or spot or whatever else.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
I have the same feelings.
So, final question before we start the show, as the classic joke goes. So, you were posting about like macro top and memes are done, etc.
Yes.
Part of the interesting sentiment shift among even the meme guys has essentially been that, well, yeah, it's obviously bearish, but like whatever. A, I don't care at this point. B, we're still like macro early for the cycle, and therefore I'm gonna get bailed out as just a slightly bigger and longer drawdown than I expected, right? Now, first of all, that's already worthy of criticism because it's the same form of goalpost shifting that you criticized last week, which is to say that, oh, well, people who all in altcoins, and then when altcoins are down like 50%, they look at BTC and say, why are you panicking? It's only down 2%. Well, it's like, that's not the point, and it doesn't affect you that BTC is down 2%. You're not down 2%, you're down 50%, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like to some extent that logic also applies to people who kind of throw in the towel and say that, yeah, I got massacred on my memes, but for these non-meme reasons, by some magic, my meme coins later will be okay, and I'm suddenly fine with this drawdown, even though 2 weeks ago I was shouting at everyone who was, who even entertained the idea of memes going down in the first place. There seems to be some sort of parallel there. So with all of that in mind, with your bearish meme call, I guess not the trade itself that's been mostly closed out, as we'll discuss, but like the general macro top or whatever else around meme coins, do you think it's like a cyclical type of top that this shit is done and is not setting new highs? Or is it more of a, I guess, cyclical rotation type of thing where this shit's going to take a while, it's going to consolidate, there'll be a bigger wipeout, but eventually it'll go back up? Like, how topish is the top call, essentially?
On the memes or on the market?
Let's do memes, yeah.
Yeah, because memes and market and like just generally is very different, I think.
I fucking hope so, man.
Because I think a lot of the memes, maybe not the ones that I've, like, for example, I've been bashing with, and it's the one that I've been most actively shorting, but that's actually quite liquid and is traded on a bunch of exchanges, right? So like it's not going to disappear all of a sudden. And I think there's going to be quite a sizable bounce on WIF eventually, where people think it's back, but I think there's a good chance that the top for WIF's in, and that's gonna stay for a while, if not forever. I don't know, but I could see the top be in for a while at least on WIF. I don't think you're gonna see WIF trade like at all-time highs in the next 6 months, and I don't think, like, I even think that if Bitcoin goes up, right, and breaks the range, I think Bitcoin would have to trade at 100K ish for WIF to be above its all-time high again. So like I think a lot of these coins, they're so ginormously wrecked, and I've seen this before, and I mean you've seen this before, we've all seen this before, that like the people that have been around for a while, like when these coins get so wrecked, you suddenly have like a large bag holder club basically, and to pump that coin, you have to put so much more money in now than before, because all these bag holders have actually been shown that they can lose money in these positions, and they're gonna be so fucking happy to close out at previous prices. Like they look at their portfolio and they were like, oh, I had $1 million in WIF, now it's worth like 500K. The moment it's back at 700, I'm gonna cash out, right? Like that's just how it works for a lot of people. So you have resistance along the way now that you didn't have before. So I think like a lot of these coins, and a lot of just generally altcoins as well, but like just the memes are the more obvious ones, because those are the ones that are actually traded this cycle. Like other shit just hasn't been. I think they're gonna struggle, even if Bitcoin goes up. But obviously, like if Bitcoin goes up, like I said, if Bitcoin goes up and breaks the range to the upside and goes to 100K, there's probably gonna be a new all-time high for the ones like Pepe. I would be surprised if not. Like Pepe's been like surprisingly strong. Like it's not surprising to me because it's a meme on ETH rather than Solana, and I think people are gonna just pivot from Solana to ETH. That's why I said like I wouldn't short Pepe ever, but I would short with, and I've been like shorting basically with and longing Pepe like on and off basically, just because I think the memes on ETH, or like at least that one meme, is gonna steal the bid away, and I think that's gonna continue largely. A lot of these the memes that CT has shilled, right? Like the answer memes, like the ones that are not on exchanges. I don't think they're gonna come back. The ones that are down like 90%, like those I think are dead. They might have like 2x's, 3x's, but I don't think they're ever gonna get close to where they were before. And like I said, the more liquid ones that you actually have markets for, they might. But I think they're gonna have to struggle a lot in the next few months to actually even go up.
Well, it's more of like almost like a bailout situation, as it has been
Oh
the
yeah,
case in many points in this cycle, right? Especially when we discuss it privately, but also on the show. It was the idea that, dude, there's a lot of vaporware, frothy dog shit, but essentially got lifted out by when remember the days when ETF flows actually had a nice impact on price? Those were fun.
yeah.
And I think that just bought us a lot of breathing room and sort of bailed really frothy altcoin markets out of what should have been big nukes, because I mean BTC would just march up, and then why the fuck would you sell anything because everything's so correlated. But we've really seen that stressed over the last couple of months, especially the last month, where the headline ETF numbers were good, but the price wasn't fucking doing anything. And then you start the sort of hindsight mental gymnastics, like, oh, it's, traders putting on the basis trade and there's a CME open interest and all this type of stuff. It's like, guys, like if you have to start doing that level of analysis, that's actually a bad thing, because it means like the obvious
Yes.
market effect that was carrying you is like no longer working per se. And then we had a sort of weak pulse so far on the ETH side of things, where the ETF consolidation broke down. And even now, as we're getting, SEC stopped their consensus lawsuit or some shit, and we're getting the S1 spot ETF forms, filings, amendments, whatever, and it still looks a bit ropey, So I want to start looking at some charts now, if that's okay with you. I know you love the talking bit, Don, especially at like 10 p.m. your time.
Yep.
So I've got BTC monthly up. I was thinking about how to introduce this right before we went live, and to me it was quite funny because it feels like a broken record at this point. Like, hey, as long as it's not, as long as it's not below 58k, it still looks fine. But that's like the fourth month in a row of saying that.
Yep.
So like, even if that's true, why the fuck is it not going up?
Yeah.
Is there a certain point, for you at least, in which the monthly time frame turns bearish pre 58k breakdown? Like, if it consolidates for another month, are you like, okay, this is taking too long, or would you rather just have a fucking line in the sand and say, there might be other time frames to bear hard, but the monthly isn't one of them?
No, I think I mean you can bet on other things, but the monthly, like, it's just a consolidation between resistance and support. It's kind of shitty.
It's a bullish pennant, bro. Study baby.
I mean, you can argue that, honestly.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, like consolidation post breakout, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to make the bearish case on the monthly. That's just a decent chart.
Yeah.
It's not great because, like, generally when you have breakouts and all-time high breakouts and they don't fucking move, that's a little bit concerning.
This is like the longest one by far. Right?
Yeah, and people keep making like comparison to like previous times. Like they're like, oh, we are exactly here in the cycle, and then they point towards like the
1 week red candle.
Like the September of 2020 monthly red candle. They're like, we are exactly here, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck? You cannot compare these. Like, it's very, very different. We haven't traded like this before. Not to my knowledge anyway. Like not since I've been around.
Yeah, no, we haven't.
And so, I mean, we are a little bit in a new paradigm. It's funny because we're kind of like, I would argue we're going through a bear market right now. Just Bitcoin isn't participating.
Right.
It's just the altcoins, which is a good thing, technically speaking, right? Like you get rid of all the risk, all of the baggage of the altcoins, while Bitcoin is holding up. Like, that's not bad. I'm not as aggressively bearish Bitcoin as I've been before in this range, right? Like, I was like thinking like, hey, this just really doesn't look that good, and I still think it doesn't look that good on the lower time frames, but just generally, like the altcoin risk that we've taken off has kind of made it a little bit more bearable on just general the market.
Well,
Like,
the sad part is it makes no fucking difference because no one holds BTC in the first place, right?
Yeah.
It's like everyone's mostly holding alt. That's why when you see that goalpost shift between altcoins and BTC, it's sort of bittersweet because you can't make reference to Bitcoin if you're just holding altcoins. And even here, it's like, well, BTC is holding up and we're just shedding the riskier parts of the market. It's like, well, the market is the riskier parts of the market. Like, no one is
Yes.
fucking holding BTC at this point. And there's also a lot of like participants overweight ETH and a bunch of other stuff. It's very kind of both iconic and ironic in crypto. You look at the strongest performing thing, and it's often the most under-owned, at least on the CT side of things.
Yeah, I mean, that is very true.
You were bull posting the weekly time frame though, right? So for anyone who's not happy with your altcoin shorts, or that you were somewhat vindicated on the meme coin front, you sort of pulled this white rabbit out of your magician's hat as far as weekly support on BTC, and it's the 60 to 63k-ish cluster, right?
Yeah. I think it's the last line of defense, basically. It's basically like, I think the 60k support level that we have on the weekly and on the daily is shit.
Oh, that's such a shame. You've always been like one of the loudest proponents of this being, 60k being a really strong support. I'm disappointed to hear that you've changed your mind.
The funny thing is, like, I was actually a fan of 60k for quite a while. It's just like it tested it too many times, and now we've tested it so many times that I just actually think it's shit.
Okay.
Not worth dealing with. Anyway, yeah, this is basically the last line of defense before we would retest 60k, and I think if 60k would just go, honestly. Like, we break this, I think 60k would just roll over. Like, maybe you get one daily green and people get like super excited, but then the next day or two, or maybe the week after, I think it would just colossally just break down, fuck people over massively. So yeah, I that's kind of like where we are right now, and you should never underestimate the last support. It's something that I've said before, just because that's where all the activity is gonna be around, and I think that's a decent spot to be somewhat bullish. The problem with it is that the daily is just not good. Like, the daily is just very bearish. So you're kind of in this situation where you are at weekly support, but the daily is bearish. So you have to either wait for the daily to flip bullish too, or you have to bite the bullet and buy the weekly and just hope that the daily is gonna go your way.
Yeah.
But that's fucking scary, especially with how the market is set up right now. I would say, and this is just me observing the market, there's very little interest right now. Like, the market's just floating around, and even like with the altcoins too. Like, usually you have like an altcoin sector that has a lot of attention and that does well even during drawdowns. Right now we have none of that, right? Like, it's just Bitcoin and it's just ETH. Like, ETH's been outperforming lately a little bit. But those are the only two, right? Like, people are gonna be in the comments and be like, "Oh, my shitcoin that has 2 million market cap has been outperforming. What the fuck are you talking about?" But that's not what this is about. Like, the larger coins and just general the market direction has been on the altcoins down, and on Bitcoin just very, very lethargic, right? Like, I mean, we went to 70k like a million times, and no one was ready to buy it. And now we're just kind of like, if you look on the daily time frame on Bitcoin, it's just been like look at these candles. Like,
it's like that meme downtrend line I sent you on WhatsApp.
yeah, it's like literally just like, and it looks illiquid too, right? You look at this, like, you look at it and it just looks illiquid, like, which is fucking wild. We're trading at 60, 70k. It's a big market now, but it just looks like, I mean, like an illiquid piece of shit, basically. And yeah, that needs to stop. And it needs to, in my opinion, reclaim 65k on the daily time frame before you can make good bullish arguments.
Is that the cluster, basically?
That is I mean, you can
Oh, you've got it from the low of 2nd of April or some shit?
16th of March, 17th of March. But you
Oh,
can
yeah,
also
that one.
make it, yeah, you can also just take the cluster from the 3rd of April, like
Yeah.
that low. I think that's also decent enough.
Or
You want
16th
to,
of May, cluster bottom. It's all the same shit.
yeah, it's all the same.
Okay.
And you want to be above there, I think.
Okay.
And then you can make the weekly argument, you can make the daily argument. Like I said, the monthly isn't that bad. And this is why I'm not as aggressively bearish anymore as I was, because now you have at least a few arguments. It's just the market is really trading shit. So like those arguments are not that strong. But that's why I closed a bunch of my trades. Like I closed Solana, even though like I think I would have been better off just being like hedging it with like an ETH long. But I was just like, I've had enough. Like I've been trading actively. Like I've not been trading in a long time. Like it's been actually quite fun getting back into the very active trading. And I was like, okay, I've had enough. I usually prefer the swing trades. But yeah, I closed Solana. I closed with. I've had a bunch of other positions going at the same time too. Closed most of those too, and now I'm just like I have a little bit of a Bitcoin short, but nothing aggressive, and something that is gonna be closed out probably today.
Okay.
Not entirely sure about it.
You don't want to spend your weekend staring at it?
Nah, I don't.
That's fair
But
enough.
not entirely sure what I'm going to do with that, basically.
Okay.
I generally look at this, like from a TA standpoint, it just looks like illiquid bleedy chop. And that's bad, right? Like that's fucking bad when you bleed and chop into the most important support levels on the chart. We've talked about this on ETH before when it was bleeding out nonstop. And we're like, hey, just stay the fuck away if you can from these kind of like from this price action, because it's going to take all your money.
The
And that's what,
drift.
the slow drift down. And that's kind of what's happening now, I think. Like people are going to get chopped the fuck up. One thing that I want to mention is that like whenever altcoins nuke, like whiffs down like 60% or something and keeps on going down like 10% every single day, is that people get irrationally bearish on things that are not actually going down, which is really fucking funny when you think about it. But they see whiff nuke, and then they're like, okay, this Bitcoin price range has to result in downside because whiff is nuking, because the market is bearish. Like they get heavily influenced by altcoin price action. And at the end of the day, that's not necessarily how the market works. Like Bitcoin can do well while altcoins nuke. And if you aggressively position yourself on something that you don't have a bearish thesis on, just because something else is dumping, there's a good chance that you just get fucked. And I think that's kind of what's happening right now in the last few hours. I posted about this where I was like, people are going to aggressively short Bitcoin just because they're bearish altcoins. And this is a stupid thing to do if you're bearish altcoins, right? Like there was plenty of time to short these. And generally, like the altcoins, like if you bearish something, be bearish that, and don't just overcomplicate it by trying to be smart about it. And yeah, that's where I think the current bounce is from. Like the daily has a little bit of wick. If that materializes into something stronger, that'd be quite nice, like above 65.2. Then you have, like I said, the setups on the weekly and on the daily and on the monthly, and then maybe you can even trade on the bullish side of things for once. If not, I'm just gonna assume that this just continues to roll over the moment it has liquidated the people that are aggressively shorting.
Right. And you're not putting your net worth on 60k holding, I'm guessing, if
No.
it keeps going down.
No, I would not buy the dip at 60.
Right.
I would buy, like, I'm down to like aggressively, and I think that's quite aggressive. Like, if you zoom out a little bit, like at 50, 52, I think that's quite an aggressive buy after a range like this breaks down, right? Like, if this breaks down, like both ways, really. Like, if this breaks up, let's talk about that first, because
Sure.
we've bear-hearted enough.
Study Europe.
Yeah, but if it breaks up, right? Like, let's be optimistic for a second. Like, let's say the bears get invalidated, this moves above 65.2, and then just basically reverses the slow bleed somehow, and then goes to 70k. 70k is shit resistance, right? In my opinion, same as 60k. Like, you go back there, I wouldn't want to bet on that. And then would you really want to be shorting like at 75? You're like, oh yeah, this range broke out, but now it's gonna go down. I don't think so. I think that's fucking stupid, right? Like you wouldn't want to be bearish at 75. You can be bearish at 80, 85 to 100 maybe, but like earlier than that, I think seems ill-advised. Just generally, like there's a huge range. You would expect it to run a while, but the same is true to the downside, right? Like you look at this thing, we are almost back at range low. Like we're actually quite close. If this breaks to the downside, we've just had a 3 to 4 months long range. And the moment it breaks to the downside, you're going to have to assume that it's a distribution range, right? Like people have been fucking dumping on your head. And then would you really, like, buying the first support at that point, which would be 52K, in my opinion, is actually quite aggressive. Like that's overly bullish just for the sake of it. And I'm actually down for it. Like if I was shorting, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I said, I've just kind of like taken risk off. But like if I was shorting, like 52K would be the target. And then I would try to re-short on the bounce, basically. But I think at that point, I'm probably just going to look on the long side. I'm not necessarily in the shorting business anymore. But that is like a 3 months range, and that's the first support. You would kind of expect that is just going to be good for a bounce, and then you're actually going to like at least spend some time there, right? Even if it's bullish and even if it holds, you'd expect price to kind of like move around 52K. Just to kind of clarify, and whenever we look at these markets, and I'm like, I always give the bulls the benefit of the doubt, right?
Sure.
And I don't give the bears the benefit of the doubt. Even though like to other people it might sound different, it's actually very much not the case. Like I'm not fair to both sides. I'm always on the bullish side of things, more so than on the bearish side of things.
And for good reason, right? As we've discussed
Yeah,
in previous
I mean,
shows, like how
this
much you
shit
can
goes
make.
up, yeah.
Yeah, how much you can make as a bull versus a bear. Also, the fact that we got to 70K from 15K in like a very short period of time, you know, kind of shows you where the asymmetry is at.
Yeah.
And the general argument, if I've understood correctly during the course of this consolidation, is some version of long, you know, the greater the duration of the consolidation, the larger the sort of implied magnitude of the move. So once the consolidation ends, you don't want to be picking up pennies in front of the steamroller by trading the support that's way too close below the range if it breaks, or the resistance that's way too close to the range if it breaks that way. You know, give it some space, and basically if a consolidation this long actually breaks out, just get the fuck out of the way and let it breathe a little bit. Don't be too keen. You know what reminds me of? The classic example of 6K. Where it's
we
like,
always go back
we
there.
always go back to it. I think we're trapped there, like mentally, psychologically.
We never left it.
We never left and never recovered. But that's like such a good example of like so many different lessons. But the main one was like sentiment around that time when BTC was at 6K before it went to fucking 3K, and you and I both bought like 4.6 to 4.8 and shat ourselves. You know, the good old days.
Yep.
The sentiment at the time was like, yeah, okay, 6K looks dog shit. And bear in mind, we've spent like a fucking year there at that point. Depending on how you measure. But it's, 6K is bearish, but like if it breaks down, we'll just like quick spike, you know, the old swiperoo at 5.6, maybe 5.4, and then we go straight back and make an all-time high. And spoiler warning, that is not exactly what happened. So like being on the wrong side of a long consolidation breaking out is probably one of the most expensive lessons that you'll ever incur, which is why it's always like a very boring mantra, but you either trade the support/resistance some way away from the range that's breaking, or you just step the fuck out completely and wait for the range to be reclaimed and gamble then when you have some sort of invalidation. But like early knife catching a shift from such a massive balanced period of trading is like not, you know, it's not for everyone, so to speak.
I think there is a trade there, like the early knife catching, like because we both bought like, and we both were like immediately in deep profit, if I remember correctly. I'm not entirely sure where you bought, but I think it was pretty much the same time as I did back then. And I still remember like I bought on a day, and then it bounced on that day like 10-15% or something back then. And then the next day I just got completely and utterly fucked, right?
Yeah, you're right. I've just found it now. Yeah.
Like I still remember this.
I mean, it
Like I
wasn't that
bought
much, dude. I'll be honest, but there's a green candle there somewhere, you know?
Oh, no, yeah, but I mean, look at it. It's the 20th November of 2018, that
Yeah.
daily candle. Like, I bought really good on that wick down.
Yeah.
And then, like, it bounced like 10, 15%, whatever. And I was like, I'm a fucking genius.
Yeah.
And then it nuked again. And I was like, fuck. And then it bounced again. And then I was like, oh, shit, I'm a genius. So, like, there's trades there, right? Like, when it completely nukes, like, you get these illiquid wicks that sometimes you can take advantage of.
Yes.
But then you shouldn't be holding those unless you're really, like, ready to give everything back, like, all that profit from that, like, entry. Because usually you have some time. What usually happens is it nukes, and then it sets a low with a wick like that, and then it kind of goes back in that area and just hangs out for a few days to a few weeks, and then it goes, right? So if you get that wick, you can usually close out, and then it's going to kind of gravitate back towards that wick, and then you can just, like, if you really want to have that position, you can get back in it in like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards.
Yeah, the old wick refill strategy.
Yeah, and that usually takes some time. Like,
oh yeah.
I'm usually too impatient. Like, I usually buy these like ginormous down wicks, and I'm like, fuck it, this is deep enough. But like, just straight up, usually like at 16K, for example, I still remember when we had the whole FTX implosion. Like, I bought the nuke, and then it bounced big time. And that was the first time where I was like, I'm actually not going to be dumb this time around, because I bought like 16, and then it bounced, and I actually sold into that daily bounce, like that massive green candle, and then I just rebought where I bought the first time around.
Yeah, and you're like, what's the point of just paying trading fees, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just like in general, just sitting there, it's harder, like holding that position when it comes back. Like, it's easy to buy when everything is nuking, at least to me, right? Like, I look at this and I'm like, oh, this is discounted, I'm buying it. But then it gets hard when it gets retested, right? Like, this, like some human psychology shit.
Oh, dude, I'm the complete opposite. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Like, I'll do some business on the initial like crunch nuke, but once I see that wick and that bounce, it just gives me like a very clear thing to target, essentially. Where I'm like, okay, well, whatever, that was the nuke or it wasn't the nuke, who gives a fuck? This thing is probably going to get refilled, and there's like a very high probability setup there, and the sentiment around the refill is going to be totally dog shit, because people are thinking, oh, well, here we go, you know, the bounce is done, and they're going to be looking to like sell into the breakdown of the low, whereas a lot of the time that's like a good buy setup.
I mean, that one I like, but if I'm in position already, like, let's say I got that nuke.
Oh, yo, fuck that, dude.
like that's what I'm talking about. Like,
yeah, no,
because
absolutely
technically it's the same, right? Like, I bought like 16K, it bounces, I just hold, it comes back to 16K.
Right.
I should be fine, right?
Oh,
but
God,
that
no.
fucking hurts. Like, it's horrendous to sit through. Even though like that setup is still not invalidated, nothing changed at the end of the day, but just having price revisit like that area where you thought that you were a genius for buying.
It's very disrespectful, like, to be honest.
Yeah, I fucking hate it.
Like, who the fuck are you to be retesting my entry? You know?
I mean, there's nothing I hate more than like when I get a buy and I'm like, this was such a Chad buy, and then someone else gets to buy cheaper. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah, that's exactly what trading is, just shadow boxing your counterparties. You know?
Exactly. Like, I'm just like, you fucker, you cannot. Like,
just a bunch of projection.
I worked so hard for this.
Yeah, so hard.
And you just come in here, you take it for free. It's not fair.
How dare you, sir? Where were you during the first wick? You low volume retest pussy.
This is why I now when it nukes, right? Like, for example, like if we get that 50K nuke, I think there's gonna be a wick into 50, and I'm gonna like try to do some business there if the market shapes up that way, and then I'm gonna close the day after and kind of reestablish like a week or 2 or 3 weeks after. Like if 50K holds, then I'm like, oh fuck yeah, let me just rebuy that. So you basically
split it up into 2 trades, right? One is the nuke reaction 1 to 2 day turnaround, and the second one is this like a medium term bottom type of trade?
Exactly, because I mean you don't really know.
You don't know, yeah.
And usually that, like, when it nukes and it gives you a big wick, like, people are ready to buy it. But if you stick around and then there's actually no follow through, you just get completely carried out.
I mean, the Sigma version of the setup, Don, is you buy the nuke and then you add on the wick refill retest type of thing, you know?
Oh yeah, but that is.
And then if
that
you're
is
wrong, you just delete your Twitter account because you have
Yeah,
no
that's
money
what
left.
I was about to say. That's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
The adding thing is
ugh.
scary. And I think anyone that's been around trading for a while, like whenever you add when it comes back to your level, like that is fucking terrifying. I'm okay. Like for example, with Solana on the way down, I actually like every single green daily candle on the way down from 170. I actually added to my position because I was like, this is just stupid. Like, why the fuck is anyone buying this? So every single green daily candle that you had in Solana, I was actually selling into. And then that's fine by me, right? Because technically, the further lower it went, the more it showed me that this is actually bearish. It's actually gonna go down. But if that was like basically if it came back to 170, I wouldn't have done any of that, right? So like because I think like sometimes it's just like you start being too stubborn, like and start adding size to pretty much the same setup just because, right? Because nothing's changed. Like if it comes back to your level, like why do you have more confidence in that level now? You should have less confidence because it's back at that level, in my opinion. So like
Yes,
it's a little
I agree
bit
generally.
It's like adding there, like taking a new trade because you're like, oh yeah, this level is still like this is a good trade, fair enough. But adding, I don't know why I would, because like I said, technically the level is weaker now. So I should have either had more size the first time
Yes.
around, or just very much don't add, because technically I'm in a worse position now than I was the first time around.
Yeah, like what is the evidence via retest that the expectancy of the setup increased? And a lot of the time
Yeah.
there just isn't any. So you either, as you said, you either didn't risk enough initially, or what the fuck are you doing exceeding your risk parameters if there's no kind of new evidence in your favor? That's totally reasonable. To bring us back from trading related rants and tangents, to be clear, on the BTC front, 63, 64 is like the real do or die. You know, if the BTC number is going to stay at 6 something, you know, if it's going to start with a 6, kind of has to come from this weekly support. If not, no faith in 60k in terms of making a trade out of that weekly structure. As always, you have two options. One is better entry, less certainty. One is worse entry, arguably more certainty. The first version is you basically try to buy as close to that weekly level as you can, and then your hope is that the daily time frame gets morphed into something positive. Like if the weekly bounce does its job, the daily shouldn't be an obstacle, right? So you're sacrificing daily certainty for a better weekly entry. And the other side of that coin is you don't make a bet on the weekly and you let the daily time frame pave the way and suggest whether the weekly is going to hold by getting back above, what is it, like 65 and change, 65.1, 65.3, whatever daily cluster range low version you prefer. And then the upside of that trade is that if the weekly fails, you don't lose any money. The downside is you might have to, well, by definition, you'll get a worse entry and you'll have to chase it because you didn't step up on the weekly level but waited for more confirmation, which is our favorite word in this entire YouTube channel.
Yep.
Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Dude, I've just been looking at like the 1 hour and the 4 hour. Like the 4 hour especially, I'm like, what the fuck is this downtrend? You know, you could just draw like a straight diagonal line through this bitch. It'd be really nice if it does. I mean, this price action, we haven't seen this pattern since, I don't know, man. This feels like a 2017, maybe 2020 type of pattern, which is just like downwards drift and then gets wiped out in like 2 days, you know? It like goes down for 2 months and then gets wiped out in 2 days with a reversal. Maybe that's a bit hopeful. In general, these drifts have been a bit sticky. But that's just bullshit commentary and doesn't contribute to the useful trade idea whatsoever. I just miss those days. Like XRP used to be the coin for that, right?
Yeah.
Like it would just
XRP
do nothing for months. Like it would just bleed for months, and then 2 days would wipe out the entire downtrend. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, like it would be up 100% on one day, and you're like, "Fuck yeah, I'm buying that." And then it's up 200% on the next day, and then you sell, and it just bleeds out for the next fucking 10 months.
Yeah,
like and over and over and over again, it would do that.
We need to create nostalgia roundup where we just go through these like 2017, 2018, 2019 trading anecdotes. I think that'd be so funny. But also depressing. Times. It's like, hey, remember when you had X amount of BTC? Okay, that's BTC. Hopefully it was helpful. As always, leave us a like, leave us a comment, you know, give us engagement. We read all the comments and appreciate people who stick around and listen. To circle back, ETH BTC is holding up and doing things, Don.
Yeah.
In the past, you developed a bit of a meme reputation for like, if everything in the world is going well, but there's a green candle on ETH BTC, you're like mega bearish.
Oh, I mean, it's still the same.
Go on, tell us why and what you think of ETH BTC as well.
I think ETH directly competes with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin really doesn't like being competed in that way. And I think that's basically why the moment you have ETH strength, what happens is people rotate out of Bitcoin into ETH. And then you get Bitcoin weakness, and people see Bitcoin weakness, and then the market sells off, right? Like, it's a little bit of an odd one because it's not the same with altcoins, right? The altcoin traders are their own breed, but the Bitcoin and ETH traders, like, because both of these are so liquid and both of these are big markets, they kind of share, like, they're the same. Obviously, there's Bitcoin maxis and ETH maxis, but just generally, like, if you have an interesting ETH market, you're gonna lose bid on Bitcoin. And opposite. That's why I've been saying, and I was laughed at for this when we got the ETH ETF news. I was like, this is not necessarily good for the market as a whole. It's just good for ETH. And I mean, that's what's been happening, right? Like, I mean, fucking altcoins are down like 80%, and like between like 50 and 80%. And it's because people are like rotating their money out of the altcoins into ETH. And Bitcoin's been struggling too. And I think it's also good. Like, one of the reasons is because people are not, like, people that would otherwise be buying Bitcoin are buying ETH. And the problem is, like, if you don't have enough people buying Bitcoin, the general market tends to go down. So we're in this weird hellish hellscape where every time you get bullishness on ETH, it's short, like it's very, very, for a very short amount of time, because basically the entire market rugs afterwards. And I mean, I cannot blame anyone for it, right? Like, if I see ETH being bullish, like, fuck yeah, am I gonna sell my Bitcoin and buy ETH, right? Like, that's just the most straightforward thing to do. It's not like these are like completely, like, it's not like you're buying like a shit coin that is gonna go down 99%. Like, ETH's probably gonna stick around. So it's like, it's not necessarily much riskier, and the upside can be quite great. Therefore, like, I'm doing the same thing, but that's kind of what's been holding ETH back and the market as a whole. It's just, we don't have enough people to buy both things. It's always just one. There's a few exceptions when the market is really, like, when everything's really cheap, but just generally when the market is heated and market caps are high and ETH goes up, usually it's not enough to hold everything up, and then we get this kind of shit price action.
So you're never allowed to buy ETH, is all I'm hearing.
Oh, I mean, I want to buy, like, I'm gonna, like, I think buying ETH before these, like, when, like, at the tail end of the cycle, or just generally, like, when everything is giga low, right? Like we had in 2021 or whatever, like, when prices are really low, is a really good thing to do. Like, that's, you're gonna make a bunch of money. But when the cycle's already been going for a while and everything's hot, that ETH buy might be the end of the cycle, not the beginning.
I mean, it's been very disappointing this cycle in general, right? The basic assumption was crypto go up, BTC go up, ETH go up, ETH outperform, voila, you've made it type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's been so Bitcoin centric, and then, the barbell portfolio meme, the ETH was the perfect midwit trap, and you talked about that fucking 8 months ago or some shit, probably less.
That was one of the best calls I made. Like, the meme call is gonna be the one that's remembered, right? But I think that was better. Like, that.
Yeah, that was really fucking good.
That was really good, but no one really gave a fuck. Like, people were holding ETH for so long, and then they've only recently really started kind of like rotating out of it, and they rotated from ETH into meme coins, right? Which is why I think so many people are fucking upset.
Fair enough.
Because now you get like an ETH ETF, but you just rotate it into meme coin, you're down 50%. You're like, I'm not gonna, like, fuck no, am I gonna rotate out of that meme coin into ETH again?
Yeah, and that drives you to more speculative stuff anyway, right?
Yeah,
if you've like lost half your money, exactly, you're like, yo, fuck this, I'm not gonna buy ETH, which can only go up like whatever X. I'm gonna go deeper in the trenches, and it's a weird reinforcing cycle. That said, do you think the ETH ETF trade is still on the table. Like sort of, BTC got the spot ETF and went up a lot. ETH is getting a spot ETF, is going to go up a lot. Therefore, buy ETH. Do you think that's dead? Do you think there's like a time component to it? Do you think it entirely depends on the actual flows we get? What's the status of that free money trade as it was advertised on Twitter?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a really, really difficult one. I think it makes sense to be bullish ETH relative to other things. But I'm not entirely sure if the market's going to go up, if ETH's going to go up. Like, I just don't know.
So you might lose less money in a relative sense, but that's the most you can offer me.
I think generally, like ETH, like Bitcoin and ETH are the ones that you want to be trading until further notice. Like, I think that's just how it is, like on the bullish side of things. Like, if you want to short stuff, I think there's a bunch of memes, not memes, a bunch of altcoins still quite overvalued.
Classic Freudian slip there, yeah.
Yeah, I just generally think like a lot of this shit is just complete and utter vapor, and people are realizing now. I think that's one thing that this meme cycle did is just eroded all belief in crypto from like even the most hardened people. I've seen a lot of like very, very strong proponents for crypto kind of throw in the towel this cycle. Sure. It's the first time I've seen that.
Oh, it's like peak cynicism and disillusionment for sure.
Yeah, like people fucking hate crypto now, and it's not like the retail hates it anyway from like just the past crimes our industry has committed, right? And I mean, fair enough, can't really fault anyone for that. Like you were told that that nano was like the thing of the future, and then suddenly it's down 99.9%. Obviously, you're gonna hate that space, right? But at this time around, it's not only the people that like lost money before or just generally hate it because they hate it because they didn't buy it. It's also just people in crypto that fucking hate it now. Like I've seen a lot of people, and the sentiment generally is quite negative. Just like the hope is very much not there, even though prices are still very high, which is the first time that I've seen that. Yeah, like usually you're deep in the bear market and then people start asking these questions. This time around, we were still like we were overheating on the memes. We were like just generally like sending it everywhere, and people started asking these questions already, and it's only gotten worse since. Which is not necessarily like a bullish or bearish commentary. Right. It's just me saying like the space has lost a lot of believers in the space and gained a lot of people believing in pump and dumps.
Great.
Yeah.
I guess it's a form of tearing off the band-aid, but I mean, every cycle brings different forms of disillusionment, but it all sort of stems from losing your money. It's just this happened to be a particularly weird one where, as a whole, things kind of went up, but the dispersion was so high. And I'm speaking in the past tense as if it's fucking over permanently, but just in general, the dispersion has been so high and the returns have been sort of sequestered to so few assets relative to previous bull markets where you could hold anything on whatever exchange you trade on and you'll be fine. That it's a weird scenario where you're getting insane disillusionment, even though the market, however you describe that, has been pretty good. And the scary part is it hasn't even gone down that much. Like in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, Bitcoin's trading at 64.
Yes, I mean, funnily enough, we're now doing the thing that we criticized whatever Twitter for doing, which is jumping from altcoins to Bitcoin. But when we primarily trade BTC and ETH, and maybe we're boomers in this, but to me that is still the market. And
everything
I actually
else
think
is just fake and
yes, I agree, but I think that makes us somewhat. It risks making us somewhat out of tune. Because realistically, if you're trying to get a sense of like the market, you want to get a sense of positioning and flows, right? And if meme coins and Solana, etc., are dominant in positioning and flows, then they, at least for that period, are a better proxy for the market than BTC and ETH. The problem is people take that to an extreme, as we've seen literally every single cycle, and this is no exception. And we have this show and discuss the same fucking thing, that if you choose to ignore BTC and ETH, you do it at your own peril, because those are like the big boys which decide the really, really high time frame trend stuff. But people get too deep in the meme coin and altcoin trenches and then think, what the fuck do I care about BTC? It's like up 2%, down 2%, whatever, I didn't give a shit. I'm up like 10,000% on my altcoins. And then when BTC actually fucking moves and takes the entire market with it, there's a rough lesson to be learned there. So that's a bit of rambling nonsense again. But I think in general, it's good to be aware of both. Sort of BTC and ETH should always be at the forefront of your mind because they're so big and so important, and the large moves happen on those. And then if you want a more accurate short to medium term proxy for positioning and flows and trends, etc., you kind of have to be more trench oriented and looking at the ecosystems and even just the high cap and the high caps and the chains with the most volume and the most speculation, etc. I think like Solana and WIF, for example, have been a decent proxy for that. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, but like that's I mean the interesting thing about that is that basically like the attention economy was on Solana and all those meme coins,
Absolutely.
and that's clearly ended, right? Like I mean the attention is still there, but price action doesn't agree. So there's been a very very big shift in the market, right? And I think people are just completely ignoring it. Where like you actually have like stuff like even the big stuff on Solana rug pull now basically. Like I mean, I'm joking about the memes and everything, but like the CT for example shilled that coin Bowden or whatever it's called, and I looked at the chart and it was down like 92, 95% ish.
That's called a bullish retest, bro.
Yeah, and I mean that's where the attention is, right? So if the attention is on something that's super fucking bearish, that tells you a lot about the market. Like if basically where all the eyes are is like moving the worst, I mean that tells you quite a bit about the market. I think just generally as like a little bit of a signal. And I just don't see that come back on Solana. I think, and this is something we've seen before, right? In previous cycles, like let's say this cycle is not over and we're gonna like just kind of rotate into something else. Like usually you don't go back to the prior kind of like for example, like usually you wouldn't go back to Solana now. You would go back, like you would go to either ETH, you would go to like something else out there that doesn't have the back holders, that doesn't have like that whole liquidity problem. And especially that doesn't have that bad reputation now, right? Because Solana has like a really, really bad reputation for people losing money now. And then people don't want to go on Solana and gamble there because I mean they associate, hey, Solana is where I lose money, and then they see someone else like trade on whatever else and make money, and they're like, oh, maybe I should try that because Solana's been so bad for me, but this other thing doesn't or hasn't
Listen, I
been.
don't think anyone's ready for Cosmos fucking meme coins
Oh,
done. So
yeah,
I
I'm
think the
not.
strongest argument against that is some version of like Solana lindiness, which is to say that so much of the speculation has taken place there, and also additionally, just from a practical point of view, so much of the tech that makes it easy to launch meme coins and trade shit and to partake in that type of speculation. Basically, all of that tech is on Solana, and the chain, in terms of its architecture, is most appropriate, at least out of all the ones we have, for that type of behavior. So I think it's slightly harder to move away from, rather than chain hopping from, for other use cases. But
Yes.
that'd be a very, that would be mega bearish Solana if you're right. Essentially, that that type of speculation goes elsewhere because people are burned. I don't think that's super likely. Again, simply because I don't think there's any fucking competition. I mean, ETH potentially, but I'm not sure whether we can play this fucking Solana ETH ping pong to like where do you go to get scammed. But if you're right, and the cynicism is so high and the amount of people burned is so high that the speculation fucks off from Solana. That's not my base case, but if you're right, I think that'd be catastrophic for. I mean, from a price,
I mean, look at the
fundamental whatever
Solana
point of
chart.
view.
No, we
Yeah,
can look at it in a sec, but like the reason why I think it will, and the reason like we're gonna get an ETH ETF, right? And
right.
if the market doesn't fully collapse, that should be bullish ETH, right? We've seen this before with Bitcoin. People were, and I keep telling the story every single time, but I think it's important. People were saying buy ETH because Bitcoin is getting an ETF and ETH is gonna get one next, and that's gonna outperform because of it. And what happened was ETH went to zero basically in comparison. And I think we're going to be in the same situation if we're bullish, right? Like this is a big thing. Like let's say this range doesn't break down. Let's say we get the ETH ETF, and if both of those things are true, right? And I think we're going to get an ETH ETF, and I mean there is a chance the range doesn't break down. I think that would be like ETH would just outperform generally in comparison to a lot of other things. And we would be in the same situation that Bitcoin was in. Basically, you get an ETH and Bitcoin solo run. And I think then people could actually directly benefit from that by trading on like on ETH, not necessarily on the base layer. You can trade wherever the fuck else you want, but basically ETH things. Because a bunch of ETH holders are gonna get more and more rich, right? And they're gonna speculate on ETH. Basically, the same reason why Solana did so well in the Solana meme coins was because a bunch of Solana holders got stupidly rich when Solana ran up. And then they were like, what do I do with all of the Solana? And they just started hyper gambling on whatever the fuck came up, right? And I think it would be the same with ETH. And if we're bearish, right, like let's say the whole ETH ETF plays out bearishly and we actually don't get good flows and we get ETH dumped on our heads and just generally there's not enough outside interest and it's just basically down, I think Solana would be the worst trade too. Like, why would you want to be like, that's where everyone got burned. That's where everyone has bags. So if the market goes down, I think it's the worst place to be. Solana, that is. If the market goes up, I think ETH's gonna be more interesting to a lot of people. So I think that meta is gonna shift to ETH. Even though, and I mean, I will like I'm not an ETH maxi. I don't even like ETH, but I think that like using Solana is nicer than using ETH. But I don't really think that matters too much. If there's one thing I've learned is that the more complicated like something is that is in general a good idea. I usually make more money the more like the harder it is to get into it, right? Like we had the whole like when the ordinals thing came around, like that was like horrendous UI. like why the fuck would you do any business there, right? Like it's not fun. You're going through a bunch of shit. You're basically terrified every step you take. And that shit went up a shitload at the start. And the moment like the infrastructure is a little bit better and like actually usable, usually you start topping out. Like,
oh, interesting.
And like that's, I mean, obviously with Solana, like we basically had that last cycle, and then this cycle we like everything worked properly for this kind of meme cycle and everything else. But just generally, like I don't think you necessarily have to have like the nicest UI. You don't have to have any of that. You just have to have a narrative. And
so
as
the
long
argument
as there's
is
money to be made, as long as there's money to be made, people will go there, no matter how bad it is.
So like the argument ends up being twofold. One is that meme coin type speculation is a product of a sort of wealth effect that happens on a chain or in an ecosystem, which is why it can sort of jump around and migrate. And part two is that friction can actually be bullish.
Oh, I mean, yes, in a way. Like if you have the right narrative, right? Like so, for example,
you
like,
need both essentially.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Basically, if there's still friction, you're early. If there's no friction, you're not early. Like at least in crypto, like
there's got to be some sort of sexual innuendo there, right? Like
probably. But I generally something that I believe in is like when stuff is easy in crypto, it's usually because like a lot of people, like it's gone through a lot of people's hands. You're not early on it. If it's hard to do, but it has some merit, right? Like if something's just shit and you're like, oh, but this is so bad. And Don said, like, if it's bad, it's good. That's not how it works. You have to
up is down.
You have to have like a good reason to be there. And I think the ETH ETF would be a good reason. And it doesn't really matter whether the ETH experience is shit or not.
Interesting.
But I guess
those traders will be more like more insensitive to fees if they've made a bunch of money from their spot ETH going up, right?
I mean, imagine ETH goes to 10K. Like, why do you care if you have to pay $50 or $100 dollars on a transaction? Now, obviously, like that doesn't apply to everyone. But just like the few people that made so much money can move like the smaller stuff on ETH like big time.
And we have so many amazing layer 2s, all of which work and totally don't fragment liquidity now. So thank God the tech has progressed so much.
I mean, this is the dumbest thing about all of it, because every time I say this kind of stuff, like people are like, oh, you're just an ETH maxi, whatever. Like, you know that this is like, there couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? I'm not a crypto maxi at all. I just like to think about things. And I can be wrong too. Like, this is not my speciality. I'm just like, kind of making clear how I think about and I'm just like kind of talking about like how I think about these things. At the end of the day, my bread and butter is just like hitting the buttons at the right moment.
And we dedicate exactly like 4% of the show to that.
Yeah. I mean,
no, I think that's pretty reasonable as a whole. I mean, the funny analogy that comes to mind when you mentioned that when something's like really easy to use and is widespread, you're not super early anymore, is when we started getting all these like when NFTs became liquid, for example. That comes to
Yeah.
mind when it became really easy to trade those, and then when DeFi started getting like, oh, the DeFi index,
Yep.
like
Yep.
across the board, and it was no longer like mercenary on-chain type, more adventurous traders using these protocols, but like, oh, I could just be long DeFi, whatever the fuck that means, through some investment product. Like, yeah, by the time it becomes like streamlined as far as UI, UX, integration, accessibility, NFTs as an example, DeFi as an example, and there are a ton of others. Yeah, the trade's probably progressed a little bit because that shit takes time to build, right? So there's
Yeah.
always going to be a lag between that thing getting a ton of attention. By the time the shit actually gets built, you're quite far along at that point.
One thing I
Let's
do
go
want to
on.
say about that topic is that like this only applies like if we're talking about Ponzi's, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you get something built on in crypto that actually like really works and is like actually used for something other than gambling, and actually has a use case, this will fall apart really quickly, right? Because then like something is gonna be like the killer app or whatever,
Right.
and then it's gonna take over everything. The problem is that's not how this market is right now.
I mean, we're
Like,
moving more towards speculation stuff, if
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So
And the thing is, like with Ponzi's, like if everyone's talking about the Ponzi, it's too late, right? Like that's literally how I think about it. Like when you get like everyone in, and if it is easy to get in, people will get in, and at some point you just run out of willing buyers. So like don't take this as gospel. Like if you find something that you actually think is gonna change the world in crypto, good luck with that. But if you do, then I mean this falls apart really quickly, and then you should obviously focus on whatever the fuck you found.
yes,
I
and also
haven't
you're probably wrong,
yet. Yeah,
just statistically.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Don, I'm aware of the time. Do you want to round up with a Solana overview? Because I think that'll encapsulate a lot of the meme takes as well. So
I mean,
you
just go on
posted,
the weekly time frame. Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I've got. That weekly level at 135. Is the weekly close going to be like a really big deal, or is there something that would
Nah.
make you a bit more open-minded here? Like, what's important as far as Sol in general? Is it just TA? Is it how other memes perform? Is it sentiment? Is it the fucking weekly close? Like, what's your? Because you were trading this pretty actively, and in
Mhm.
general, you've actually been pretty in the trenches from a centralized exchange point of view. I know that because I got that WhatsApp message from you being like, I can't believe I fucking closed and it was sailor buying, etc. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, he's like, well, first of all, he's talking to me outside of Casual Friday. This is very strange and unusual. Um,
Fuck off.
but second of all, this kind of like live trading commentary, I'm like, oh, he's like actively on it. So, what are the implications here of Sol 135, or in general, this is something? I mean, you were literally selling every fucking green candle on the daily by your own admission. So,
Yes.
what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the weekly time frame, like we had that high at 200, and then we had a lower high at 170. And I mean, we talked about this on this show, and I even on a Wednesday stream, like I threw up like a risk through reward tool, and it was like short 170, stop loss 200, target like 100, right? And that trade actually like looks really good now. Obviously, like it moved in that direction. It is at support at 135. But the reason why I really like that trade is because it's basically like it's a bet on the cycle being over. Because I mean, if you look to the left, it's kind of done. It's kind of done similar things before, just kind of completely nuking. Like you had a high at 250, and then you had a secondary high at 200, and then it just fucked off. It's very, very similar structurally, even with the consolidation on the left side of it, which kind of was like, even if I'm wrong, the payoff, if I'm right, is massive. So it's good enough of a trade to take. And yeah, now it kind of played out from 170 to 135. It's the first support, first trouble area, whatever. I think if we close this weekly here, we could get a little bit of upside next week, but I think it would get basically wicked, and then we would go lower. I generally think this looks like it's going to go lower. I'd be shocked if it went higher. I think, generally speaking, there's a good chance this goes to 100. And if you want to be really bearish, I think like $70. And the cool thing about it is that like if you took the $170 trade or like in that area, and that's the new invalidation now, because that should be the complacency shoulder of the chart if you're right. So basically, like stop loss at break even, can't lose, easy peasy, and
The classic.
and the target is quite low down. Basically, like I think Solana is the best hedge for betting on the cycle being over for now. Because
Ouch.
like I said, with the whole meme coins on Solana thing and like people losing a bunch of money, I think there's a lot of people still holding like a little bit of Sol, a little bit of these memes and that meme. And the moment they capitulate, what they do is they sell into Sol and then they sell their soul.
Sell their soul.
That was yeah, no, but then like that's the flow. Basically,
Yes.
we've gone through this before on ETH in 2018.
Dude, I was just about to say, like, there's a sort of, I don't know what this effect is called. It's some sort of like ecosystem complacency. Like if you're like we had this exactly with ETH NFTs. Like if you're balls deep in NFTs, or you get so stuck in measuring everything like, oh, this is the floor price, this is the floor price in ETH. A lot of these motherfuckers didn't know that ETH went down 50%.
Yep.
They were like, oh, the floor price is the same, my investments are good, and they check their fucking USD price and are in for a bit of a surprise. And then God forbid they try to sell some floors in the OpenSea era, or especially try to sell some rares or kind of mid collection type of pieces. You realize that you got cut in half in USD, and there's no liquidity for the thing that you're actually trying to sell. And whatever number you thought you had in that ecosystem is in reality a fraction if you try to cash it out into something liquid. And I think 100% this is something similar applies to Solana. If there's a real downturn where people are holding N amount of money denominated in a meme coin on Solana, but then there's a kind of very reflexive cascade essentially, where if Sol goes down, the liquidity on these shitters get worse, so your fill prices and execution on jumping out of them costs you a lot, and then you're actually holding the Sol, you manage to get out of the illiquid thing or the meme coin or whatever, already taking a haircut, and you take an extra haircut on fucking selling your Solana into USD or whatever else. So that's why I think sort of not focusing too much, or not taking to heart the number that you see if you're mostly invested in like ecosystem coins or meme coins or liquid stuff. Like you need to have a large discount rate, I think, in your head for like taxes and liquidity, and are you going to sell the top versus the bottom, and then rotating from the ecosystem coin to USD. Like, dude, there's a lot of hoops to jump through before you get your money.
Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of the drag on it, and that is, I mean, if the people come back, right, like, and like if the market goes up, like that could reverse, and then I would change my tune.
Sure.
But for right now, I think that's kind of like the drag on Solana, and the 135 support is just it's been tested too many times. Like it's like Bitcoin 60K support. I don't like it. I think we could bounce from it. That's why like I closed. I was like the reason why I closed is basically I added so much on the way down that I like the position size started getting out of hand, and then I was like, okay, I like if this actually bounces a bunch, I actually just don't like it that much.
Yeah.
And I've also traded like way too much on this, so I just kind of like I got out. If I just kept my original position, would have made much less money, but would have been more comfortable probably. Sure. So maybe that's me mismanaging. I'm not entirely sure yet. For now, I just made a bunch more money than I would have otherwise. And it actually needs to go towards like 110 or something for me to be worse off than I would have otherwise. So
some aggressive compounding, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was like, this is stupid. Like people are being fucking dumb here, and then I just sold into everything again. Like,
I think next week we should do a bit of a deep dive on how the fuck you compound a position. Starting size versus when to add, trading the stop. I think if that sounds interesting to our audience, leave us a comment, and I'll, as I usually do,
probably forget.
Yeah, well, probably. But if I don't, I'll pry that information out of Don. But look, all of this is very doomy, gloomy, European 10, 11 p.m. bear talk, Don.
Yes.
So I'm going to give us.
I mean, I closed.
You closed. So okay. First, that's a good mitigating point. You closed, and also, at the end of the day, we're going to put the dog with the hat on the Las Vegas sphere, and we're going to get mega ETF inflows, and it's all going to go to infinity. Fuck you, Monaco 2025.
That chart is something else. Yeah, holy shit. Like I've been, it's the same story with Sol, like just with Whiff. I was like just aggressively shorting this thing. I did hedge it with Pepe longs. It's quite hilarious because Pepe actually really doesn't look that bad. Like it's one of the few coins that actually doesn't look that bad. And I think that's an early sign that what I'm saying is happening. Basically, people are moving to ETH.
Yeah, reading some tea leaves there for sure.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
No, we'll
I mean, Pepe is the better meme, just even face value, like in my opinion. But,
I mean, the frog doesn't have a hat, so I don't know, man. So...
that's true. But we can put a hat on the frog. I'm sure that.
Oh,
can
someone's
be done.
gonna launch that meme coin now, and then when it rugs, it'll be your fault.
Oh fuck.
Frog with hat.
I mean, doesn't sound that bad.
Oh, fuck you.
Nah, I'm just kidding. Don't make meme coins. Anyway, was the same story there. I actually closed this, and I mean, honestly, I should have probably kept it open. I closed it like it broke at the range, and then like below $2, I was like, okay, it's enough. I was like, this is the same kind of story where I just like I got trading fatigue, but I still think there's like a good chance that this just keeps going. And I think the better trade would have been like the better kind of way to go about it would have been just being like, I'm gonna keep this short as long as it's trading below 2.23, because I think there's a chance. Like if this market does what I think it can, which is just Bitcoin breaking down, going towards 50K, and let's be clear, like Bitcoin going to 50K is not bearish. Right? Like that's a fucking bull market pullback. But people are so fucking zoomed in and so in the trenches, trading completely at the dog shit that, I mean, that would take altcoins down 90%.
I mean,
right?
It'd be bearish my ability to pay my mortgage, but that aside, I'm sure it's macro bullish, whatever the fuck that means. The loan sharks don't care, Don. When they come to my house, my borrowed house with hammers, and I tell them, listen, bro, I got liquidated, but actually this is like a fractal macro pullback. I don't think they're going to listen to me. I mean, they don't even speak English, for fuck's sake.
No, but I mean, like, let's be real for a second, right? Like, because that's the reality of it. Like,
sure.
If Bitcoin goes to from like 60, it was at 70, let's say 70 to 50K, right? Like, what kind of pullback is that? Like, that is from top to bottom. That would be a trading view. Help me out here. Why does it not want to? There we go. It would be a 30% pullback.
Yeah, it's like old school textbook.
Yeah, I mean, we used to get 40% regularly. Yeah. So like this is a 30% pullback. We've pulled back half of that, not even. And all coins are down. like literally like the entirety of CT is dead. And 90% of crypto traders are fucked. Which is just insane to think about. So yeah, I think there's a world in which WIF just goes below $1, and I'm like, I should have just like could have been a blue chip short.
Blue chip, yeah, your favorite term.
Yeah, just holding that forever. It's a, but no, I was like, it's enough. And I also like at some point I feel bad. Like I actually started feeling bad.
Oh wow.
Because I mean, it's like it's not my fault, and people claim that it is, but it's not my fault that this thing is going down. It's a fucking dog with a hat that you're betting on, right? But I started feeling bad, and I was like, "Fuck it, made enough money on this. I'm gonna concentrate on the more liquid stuff because it's not like you can get much size on WIF anyway. So this is just more of like an ego / haha, I'm making money, like even though you called me a retard kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like I closed that too. I think like if you're generally like if you're a newer trader, smaller trader, whatever, and you took a WIF short like at like 315 or like anywhere on the way down, the proper invalidation for that trade would be above 2.23, and then you can just basically hold this thing. I don't think that's necessarily like the worst in the world. And then just close into a capitulation candle, which I mean, I think if the market continues to be weak, it's like days away. Like you could get like a 50% down day on WIF, I think, or like 40% on a lot of these coins actually. Like even on Solana, I could see like a 30% down day if the market starts going down. Like if Bitcoin goes to 60K, I could see Solana be trading at 100. And I could, like if Bitcoin goes to 50, I could see Solana be trading between 50 and 70. Just based on how the market
Dude, what's
is
the
set up
fucking
right
point?
now.
I gave us like a bullish bailout for this show, and you just dragged the entire
but
thing back
what
to your
what I'm
low
saying,
targets.
What I'm saying is that like the market really needs to go up.
Oh, great.
Because otherwise it's gonna get really fucking bad, I think.
Okay.
So
it's like we've barely pulled back in the grand scheme on BTC, and there's already a ton
yes.
of carnage. So if the pullback is actually material, then the carnage goes up non-linearly, and
Yeah.
you get screwed. But you also get some fucking banger trades if you have
Yes.
anything, any cash lying around, or anything that's not, liquidation emails in your inbox.
Yeah.
And I still think you can, if that happens, you can still buy some fucking Solana and maybe some fraction of a meme coin, just for the tail scenario that, we're actually fucking early to altcoins and it's the final shakeout, etc. I think if you get a wipeout, it shouldn't be like, okay, well, let's just fucking sell the first bounce immediately. I think you want to give yourself at least a chance that if it is like 30% bull market pullback, etc., etc., it's like one of the first opportunities to get really fucking cheap entries on dog shit that, has basically left any moderately high time frame trend follower missing very clear entries on that one.
I mean, I agree, and I don't want to be the giga bear type. Like I said, I closed my position, so just by definition, I'm less bearish now than I was before. I'm just saying, like, don't discount how fucking wrecked you get if this breaks down and you're in these, but also, like, I mean, if it goes up, like, fair play, then you're probably going to make more money than you would be doing in.
Yeah, listen, Dom, we're at weekly support on BTC. You said it's the best level you've ever seen.
Yes.
So it's gonna reverse and everything will be fine. Fuck you, basically.
I mean, fair enough. Like I'd be down.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm sitting here being like, haha, let's go. I'm seeing weakness. I don't like it. I'm saying, like, there's cause for concern, but also we're getting an ETH ETF in no time whatsoever, and maybe that's just gonna, like, pull the market back up. I don't fucking know. Could be. Yeah, like I said, I think I'm just coming out of, like, a very active trading week, and then you're just like unreasonable and just rambling, and that's kind of what I've been doing. So
I mean, that is this show at its core.
Yeah.
Well, the show is like unreasonable rambling from both of us, and then me trying out like one bit of alpha in an hour and a half in terms of how you actually fucking do this stuff. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, well, I have a gut feeling, and I'm like, okay, fuck me. Thanks for watching. Woo, please keep paying us.
Yep. That is how it goes.
That's how it goes. All right, man. That's all we have for this week. Sorry for the late upload of this Casual Friday. Something to listen to on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. Leave a like on this video before you leave. Subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate it. We're catching up with BTC. It'd be better if we did it with our subs going up, not BTC going down. Thank you to Woo for supporting the show. As always, there's some fun announcements coming on that front, so keep an eye out for those. If you haven't checked it out already, you can do so in the description. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll speak to you next week.
Bye.